Where are we? Hi, Jewel. Let's give it a few minutes before we begin. It's just you and I so far. Oh, wait, someone just joined us. Lisa, good, and Fabian. Okay, we're getting up there. Bear with me, everybody. I'm just trying to see what the status of one of the assignments is. Good, Karen, and you can stay. Now I can say who it is. Great. Okay, I'll look at that later and as soon as we're done and grade it. But I don't think you had done it earlier, so I wanted to make sure because I am going to go through the answers. So great. Thank you very much. Um, all right, let's see who else is with us. Good. Tyler, Lisa, Jewel, Fabian, Aaron. Okay, we got a quorum, so let's move ahead. Um, Similar to what I did this morning for folks like Fabian and Aaron were with us. Um, and with me at that point, and are in my other course. I'm just going to go through the most recent homework. I'm going to go through the answers, and similarly to what I did last week, when it comes to the short answers, because I don't really complete those on my master cheat sheet guide. I'm going to call on you guys to tell me what you wrote and why you did, and because I liked what you had to say. And I've got my little notes on who I want to call on. But let's just start with the true and false questions here at the top. Number one, most emerging market economies established their central banks after World War One, a few years after their independence from colonialism. That's a comment right out of the text, and that's a false statement. So I know a few of you did think that that was true, but nope. Sorry. You can go back in and look up central banks or as a keyword. If you want, I can always point you to it if you got questions. Just shoot me an email, but it is definitely a statement right out of the text that I took. I twisted it around to make it false, and that's kind of where we're at here on number one. On number two, talking about central banks again, initially they were set up privately or joint stock banks that provided commercial banking services along with banking services to other banks. And that is a true statement. That's another one right out of the text. So, if I remember correctly, just about all you got that one. So, you're very good. On number three, and there was a little trouble with this one. A lot of you weren't quite sure on this and missed it, but all banks have an account at the Fed. And that's a true statement. That's another one right out of the text. So,
I'm sorry. I have a question regarding this question because it says all banks, and I can bet you a lot of money that some regional banks in foreign countries do not have an account at the Fed. So I think the question is a little bit unclear in terms of which banks are meant. And I also think that non-member banks, which are not part of the Federal Reserve System, they are not required to have a bank account or an account with the Fed in which they hold deposits.
okay.
Um,
That's a good
so
point, Fabian. I mean, non-member banks might be excused from that requirement. Similar to what I did last week, which was look up something in the text for you. I'll do that on number three. So let
right,
me
but the text is might be wrong on that one. That's what I was
okay.
trying to
Let
bring
let
across.
me see. Let me see how it is worded in the text. If they just skim through it and don't really talk about it very much, other than just saying that all banks, and if they're very general like that, saying that all banks, um, and don't clarify anything further, then maybe I will throw out that question. So we'll see. I'll make the ruling on number three. Um, this is BA 470, week 7, number 3, question that statement. Okay, yeah, definitely, Fabian, I will. And as I mentioned, several of you did get that wrong. I'm just looking at my little list of results, and it looks like you know a majority of you did get it wrong. So if I can turn that around for you based on what is said or inferred in the text, then I'll be happy to do so. So we'll see. Um, Let me make
Thank
that a
you.
problem. Okay. Uh, okay. Number 4, open market operations are rarely used to affect changes in reserves in the banking system due to their volatility and risk. Well, I made that one up um, out of the blue, kind of. Open market operations are a regular and um, often used um, method that the Federal Reserve employs to affect the money supply in the banking system. So, and they're not overly risky and they're certainly not volatile. So that's definitely a false statement. All right, let's continue on. Number 5, the Fed injects reserves into the banking system through open market operations and by making loans to banks, which are referred to as discount loans. They often come from the discount window, which we'll be talking about in a later question. So yeah, that's a true statement. Everybody agree with that? Everybody good? I don't think any of you missed that one. Okay, great. Let's continue on. Market equilibrium occurs when the quantity of reserves demanded equals the quantity supplied. Sounds like a pretty obvious statement to me. There may have been a few people that got that one wrong, though. Anybody have questions on that? Okay, good. I mean, you know, whenever a supply and demand are equal, that's usually a state of equilibrium, unless there's something strange with the with the environment that's surrounding the question. But yeah, I mean, quantity of reserves demanded and the quantity supplied. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, Canada was very late in founding their central bank, as I read in the text. So I changed it around to make it a false statement. Said they were pioneering, global pioneer in founding the central bank. Um, so hopefully nobody has a question on that one. It's a pretty straightforward question. Also, I read as I was going through the text to find questions for you guys. I read that the People's Bank of China is still considered to be the largest financial asset holding in foreign currency reserves being held uh, by any central bank. So the People's Bank of China, that's right out of the text, and that's a true statement. Moving on, number 9. While the Federal Reserve has historically been more independent than almost all of the central banks, the structure and the level of political independence of the European Central Bank make it even more independent. And I think that's another question. That's a statement that's right out of the text, which is a true statement. But I think a lot of that has really come about due to the uh, European Union and how the European Central Bank has become even more independent because of its unusual structure now, where it's potentially a central bank for a number of different countries in Europe. But yeah, that's a true statement. That's again right out of it. Let's see. Okay, number 10, to derive the demand curve for reserves, we need to ask what happens to the quantity of reserves supplied, um, holding everything else constant as the prime lending rate changes. The prime lending rate has nothing to do with the demand curve for reserves. So that's really a false statement. It's another one right out of the text that I just, you know, kind of did some wordsmithing and changed it into a false statement by adding that little piece on the prime lending rate change. So that's a false statement. All right, guys, let's get into these short questions where I give myself a chance to rest my voice and let a few of you guys talk about what you wrote. But on number 11, we're talking about briefly describing what is meant by open market operations. We covered that in an earlier question, but Fabian, you answered pretty well here. I liked your answer and gave you 100% score on it. What did you have to say about open market operations?
So I said that open market operations refer to the purchase and sale of securities in the open market. by a central bank. And so in the US, for example, the Fed conducts open market operations to adjust the amount of reserve balances and thereby influences short-term interest rates, and especially the federal funds rate, or in particular.
Yeah.
And when the Fed wants to lower the federal funds rate, the Fed buys securities from banks. And so the Fed, by doing so, increases the amount of reserves banks have on hand. And that increases the supply of money available for lending.
Right.
And the increase of supply of money for lending lowers, or at least tends to decrease the cost of borrowing for that money,
Right.
which is the interest rate. That is because banks that now have excess reserves are more willing to lend, and the competition among the banks then drives the interest rates down. And if the Fed wants to raise the federal funds rate, they sell securities to banks, and this reduces the reserves of the banks. So basically, just a vice versa process. It decreases the supply of money for lending, then less money is available for lending purposes, which makes the money more scarce and increases the cost of borrowing, basically increases the interest rate. And yeah, so open market operations are used by the Fed to manipulate this federal funds rate.
Yeah, thank you. That was really a good answer. And I particularly liked your answer because you discussed the impact on the money supply, which, is kind of more of an economics take on open market operations and what the Fed does. But because if you get into an economics course, it's all about supply and demand of money, the money supply. And when obviously when it contracts, money becomes more scarce. And for that reason, that's when, interest rates tend to climb and the cost of borrowing will climb in those instances, as you mentioned, baby. And so thank you very much for that. And then obviously vice versa. When they sell, I'm sorry, when they purchase securities in the open market and they inject money into the money supply, then that will tend to lower interest rates. So great, good, very good answer. Thank you very much. Okay, number 12. Uh, they're asking about the discount window and how this might affect the volume of borrowed reserves. Jewel, you gave us a pretty good answer on that one. What did you have to say about number 12?
I wrote the facility at which banks can borrow reserves from the Federal Reserve is called the discount window. Borrowing from the discount window has a stigma because it suggests that the borrowing bank may be desperate for funds and thus in trouble. There is primary lending where the interest rate on the loans is the discount rate and is set higher than the federal funds rate target, usually by 100 basis points, because the Fed prefers that banks borrow from each other in the federal funds market so that they continually monitor each other for credit risk. As a result, in most circumstances, the amount of discount lending under the primary credit facility is very small. Secondary credit is given to banks that are in financial trouble and are experiencing severe liquidity problems. The interest rate on secondary credit is set at 50 basis points above the discount rate. The interest rate on these loans is set at a higher penalty rate to reflect the less sound condition of these borrowers. The discount rate set by the central bank affects the cost of borrowing from the discount window. When the discount rate is relatively low, it encourages banks to borrow more from the discount window, increasing the volume of borrowed reserves. Conversely, a higher discount rate may discourage banks from utilizing the discount window, leading to a decrease in the volume of borrowed reserves.
Yeah, I like that answer. Thank you, Jewel. I liked what you had to say about the discount rates themselves and how those then affect activity and borrowing activity, which is conducted at the discount window. I mean, it wasn't like you just talked about the discount window and what it does only. You went on to talk about how that then affects the rates, which then obviously affect, the borrowing, um, behavior of the different banks that may need funds and, for their own, purposes. So very good. That was a good answer. Um, okay, number 13, we're going to talk about the, what is the term, auction facility. It was kind of a unique sort of a situation that arose when the economy hit the skids in 2007 and 8. Um, Tyler, you gave us a pretty good answer. You want to talk about number 13 and the TAF?
Yeah, sure. So what I wrote is that the TAF basically provides a way for banks who need money to borrow in a more competitive environment rather than at the discount rate.
Right.
Because that discount or the TAF rate is basically set by a more competitive environment. And that rate is also set lower than the discount rate always.
Right.
It's not at that penalty rate that the discount rate is set at. So it serves a similar function to what the discount window is in that it allows banks who are somewhat struggling to take out a loan. And the main reason why it was implemented was because it was sort of stigmatized for banks to take out loans from the discount window because it just kind of showed that they were struggling. And it was kind of a sign of weakness. So the TAF was a pretty good alternative to the discount window. So yeah, that's basically what I
Yeah,
said.
yeah, absolutely. Good answer. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, definitely. Especially when, we had the housing and the mortgage crisis in 2007 and 8, and that led to a lot of, real pressure on banks when, so many people started defaulting on their mortgages because, so many substandard mortgages, had been offered by banks just, without any real concern about what could potentially happen. That's when this TAF really was brought, to the forefront of lending by the Federal Reserve, and why the TAF became what it ended up growing into, as a very important augmentation to the discount window. So great, thank you. All right, number 14. Dylan, are you with us? I like what you happen to write about the, why a central bank might set a negative interest rate within its country or within its economy.
Yeah. 1 second.
Yeah, you had a pretty good answer there. You got that handy?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Great.
Okay, so for number 14, I said a central bank might set negative interest rates for several reasons. First of all, is it can stimulate economic growth and lead to more lending to businesses and individuals, which will encourage economic activity within a country. Another reason is to combat deflation within a country. This can be caused by lack of spending within a country, but if more supply of funds are available, then the spending will go up and economic activity will grow.
Yeah, I mean, right. Thank you very much. I mean, that's a good succinct answer. I mean, there's really not much more to it than the fact that a negative interest rate is going to stimulate an economy, right? I mean, if borrowing is 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 as cheap as it can possibly get, then obviously that's going to, allow for more economic activity. It increases the money supply. There's more, borrowing as this eventually filters down to consumers. The whole 9 yards. So yeah, definitely, the whole idea why a central bank might set a negative interest rate is really to stimulate their economy, um, and, help bring it out of a, lethargic sort of a stage or a period. So yeah, great. Thanks, Dylan. That's a good answer. And then the last, short answer question is number 15. Briefly discuss, two types of asset price bubbles. Lisa, you gave us a pretty good answer in this. Can you talk about number 15 a little bit and asset price bubble? Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah,
All right. I said asset bubbles arise when an asset's price increases rapidly to an unsustainable price greater than its fundamental economic value. They are driven by credit booms a lot of the time. Two types of asset price bubbles were the tech stock market bubble in the late 1990s and the housing price bubble that happened recently.
yeah. I mean, those are two great examples, and definitely, you're right. You're right on the money about the cause of the asset price bubbles. I mean, that's section right out of the text, and Lisa gave me a pretty good answer there, so I wanted her to get involved in the discussion today. That's why I called on you. I could have called on just about any of you because you all did pretty well with that. So thank you very much, Lisa. That's a good answer. Let's just carry on here. I'll just go through these last 5 questions that are multiple choice. The recent financial crisis has clearly demonstrated the bursting of credit-driven bubbles. There you go. Um, uh, and the situation is there that the answer is B, which are that these are costly and difficult to correct. I think as I look through the list, it looks like just about all of you got this one correct. I don't remember seeing that incorrect anywhere. But if you look at some of the other answers, I mean, they're obviously not right. Important to the growth of consumer purchasing power. Huh? No. Um, or important indicators of a recovering economy. No. You know, uh, a lot of these questions, I when I'm making up false, incorrect answers, they're usually pretty obvious. Although sometimes I try to make them reasonably, possible. I don't want to give it away too much, but yeah, I mean, anytime you got a situation where, you see the words financial crisis and the bursting of credit driven bubbles, you have to pretty much take it for, for the, from the wording that this is a caustic situation and they're difficult to correct. And that is a question or a statement rather that is right out of the text. And I took that to the problem number 16. Okay, moving on, 17. Conventional monetary policy tools are ineffective when what happens? Um, Once again, I'm making up a whole bunch of, impossible answers, or at least ones that are clearly false, in my mind anyway. Uh, but this is another statement right out of the text. And the tools are ineffective when the zero lower bound problem occurs. That's that's discussed in the text, and that's right out of the text. So it looks like just about everybody got that correct too. So great. Let's carry on. Um, Research suggests that low interest rates may encourage what? Um, uh, Once again, I came up with a bunch of false answers that are probably pretty easy to weed out. But if you look at the first statement, the excessive risk taking within the risk taking channel of monetary policy, that term is in quotations as it is right out of the text. Um, when low interest rates are in force in the economy, obviously then people are going to take more risks in borrowing and what is discussed as the risk taking channel. Okay. So hopefully that's pretty clear. I don't think any of you missed that. Uh, so let's move on. Number 19, prudential supervision is subject to more political pressure than monetary policy because of what? Well, I tried to throw in a little bit of some statements about governments and administrations, consumers have insufficient knowledge, things like that. But, it's pretty clear that, it affects the bottom line of financial institutions more directly, which is answer D. That's a statement right out of the text. And I think everybody got that correct too. All you guys did great. The big problem that I saw was on number 3 that that Fabian has asked about. I mean, and I'll be happy to research. I mean, all the other questions. I mean, you got a few here and there that people miss, but I mean, I don't think any of you missed more than 2 or 3 questions. So I'm very pleased with what I see. You guys are doing great. All right. And then the last question is number 20. An important lesson from the global financial crisis. And what they're referring to there is what happened in 2007 and 2008, is that central banks and other regulators should not have a laissez-faire attitude. And what? Well, you have to stop and think about what really caused that global financial crisis, which I'm gonna, specifically point to as being, the 2007, 2008 housing crisis, mortgage crisis, and that was the credit-driven bubbles that occurred, and ended up, causing a lot of mortgage defaulting, and as a result, a lot of banks failed that were, heavily engaged in, substandard mortgage lending. So the laissez-faire attitude, okay, well, fine, that probably should never be the case. But the important thing was, the second piece of that statement, which is, that there should be no allowance for credit-driven bubbles to continue with little reaction. I mean, you can allow credit bubbles to occur, but without having any reaction to those credit bubbles, without taking any steps to minimize them or eventually eliminate them, is a recipe for disaster. So, so number 20 is the answer is definitely B there. And that's it for our assignment. You guys, once again, you guys all did very well. I'm very pleased. How's everything going? Anybody have any questions or anything other than the fact that I'm going to investigate number 3 based on Fabian's comments? Anything?
I was confused about 3 as well, so I'm with Fabian.
Okay, yeah, I'll see what I can find what how the text addresses that statement. I mean, I take all these right out of the text, but the question is, I mean, did I leave out a couple important words, or is the text, very, very specific and clear, or is it a little too general for that kind of a question? So I will definitely look at number 3.
Thank you.
Anything else, guys? Everybody else good? Okay, let me just page up to the I want to take a look at the course shell and see what's going on. Okay, we are obviously in week 8. So next time on Wednesday, we can talk a little bit about any questions that you may have after beginning to take a look at the week 8 assignment. I obviously don't want to give anything away. Excuse me, but I will be I'll be happy to put you all on the right track. If I could do so, I'm happy to. And I'll also go over any questions that you guys might have on chapters 11 and 12. since obviously the week 8 assignment is based on chapters 11 and 12 out of our text. So that'll be our plan for Wednesday. I will hopefully have an answer for you on question number 3 from the week 7 assignment before then. And if necessary, we can talk a little bit about that and why I make whatever decision I end up making on that one, why I did that. So, if nobody else has anything else, I'm gonna let all you guys scoot.
Thank you.
Everything good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
Wednesday. Bye-bye.
See you
Bye.
Wednesday.
Thank
Bye.
you.